we want to be able to continue to bring about the supply or solve the supply problem that we are dealing with. And that's why we actually launched Buy to Let. So that by so doing, investors can plug in. We go out there, partner with developers, look for properties that are like high yielding investments, and then people can buy and then get guaranteed rent up to 10 years and more. So, but real estate is really a good investment. You just have to be smart. Just any investment requires you to have to be smart in some ways so that you can do your...
Please shed more light on that, because I mean, just the thought of having to deal with the financial aspect, like you rightly said, people are not literate enough, just having to deal with proper channels, the proper channels we need to invest. Like, so how do we find these things? How do we find things that will benefit us as long-term investments, as most real estate investments are?
All right, good. So I think this can be done several ways. I know we have different type of investors. Some are really busy that they really don't have the time to do the work themselves. So such investors can make use of investments managers. You have them either as individual or corporation. So there's a lot of companies that deal with managing assets and all of that. So those are there because that, yes, we are advised. We, at the end of the decision is still yours, but we've used technology to be able to provide as much information. Or for example, on Buy to Let, if you go on Buy to Let, you can compare one property to another based on the price, selling price, based on the rental yield and all of this. So you can see the gross yield of this property. You can see 10 years from now, what would this property be making? So we've used technology to be able to create, compute all these numbers that someone that is not really investment savvy or doesn't really, is not very deep with numbers can look at it, as long as you know the basic, what gross yield is, and all of that. So you can either use an investment vehicle or investment company to manage your investment, to advise you, or you can use a platform like ours that has done it seamlessly to be able to guide you in choosing the right investments.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to go over to Basheer, and he has a presentation that he has prepared for us, so he would share his screen shortly, and then he can weigh in on our conversation.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I'll just pick out the slides.
Okay.
I apologize. I'm in Abuja. The internet is not very stable, so once in a while I may switch over.
Okay.
So let me just talk about the fact that what has become very important, is that Nigeria is a very poor country. And people must realize that. So when you realize the country is poor nations come with certain characteristics. Everything doesn't work because you're poor. Being poor is a function of the level of production. Production is very low compared to the population, right? So when production is very low, it means that it affects every sector: health, judiciary, housing. It even affects the animals, on the streets, our pets at home. It affects everybody. Now, when that happens, it means that there's no adequate supply in any market, in any industry, whatever you want. And food is not sufficiently supplied. How much more housing? Clothes is not sufficiently supplied. Now, when you have this problem in the country, coupled with the fact that inflation over the last 40 years has not been stable, it rises. And FX, of course, over time rises very sharply. So you even compare with, say, Kenya and South Africa, countries that are not doing badly, we're far behind. And when you have these characteristics, it means that the results you're going to be getting is not going to be fantastic, right? So, for example, the real estate market, I appreciate the first speaker's point of view. But again, for me, I'm going to be looking at it from the angle of finance. Where is the money coming from? Is it coming from the government? Is it coming from NGOs? Is it coming from individuals? The UK, for example, they provide social housing. In Singapore, in South Korea, in the US for women, even in New York, women, if you've got kids, they're going to give you your house. Now that comes from the government. Now, in some other jurisdictions, they have some kind of unique social housing whereby you can buy a plot of land in the US, a parcel of land for $1. When you buy that land, you're going to be allowed to use half of it, for, if you like, social housing, low rent, and all of that. By social, I mean subsidized housing. When something has been subsidized, either from the supply side or the demand side. By supply, I mean construction side, and by demand, I mean the rent or the mortgage side. So when you have such subsidies, it makes that very easy. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, subsidy is not that much available. A bit of it in terms of interest rate, but still very far behind. Now, in cases like this, what that then means is that it's extremely difficult. You can only control what you have. If you do not control housing supply as a government or as a people or as an NGO, it means that you can't just give it out at whatever price. So I appreciate the fact that, yes, it's interesting to have houses in the markets, where you can pay rentally, you can pay monthly, for example. I mean, I remember that in my past employment, we did that. And there was a reason why. The houses were built already. People couldn't buy them. They were too expensive in Lekki One. At the end of the day, we thought, hey, this is going to be a bad debt on our books. Why can't we furnish them and then rent them to people? So a flat was rented to 3 people, for example, and they could pay their rent every month, right? So we had to spread the payments. That's because the houses were built. There's already a bad debt on the books, if you like. So the best thing was to structure it in a manner that makes it perform, right? So that's what we had to do that. Ordinarily, again, we try to look at back to the source of the wealth that you're using to build, or the source of the cash, the money. If you're an investor and you have made money from whatever, you got bonus, you use your personal money to build houses. You can collect your rent every month, not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. You can collect it every day if you like. You can collect it as you like, But if you're taking that money from a financial institution to build or to buy or to rent or let and sublet, as the case may be, it means that you have to then also consider the cost of the fund, and the volume of that cost of fund, and the pressure that comes with cost of fund. Immediately you're conscious of that reality, it changes your mindset and it changes your behavior dramatically. Right. So yes, on the one hand, people must start to invest. I mean, of course, the more advanced economies, you have cases where people co-own properties, right? 5 people can come together, they can co-own the property, the rent is guaranteed. Even where the rent is not guaranteed, to a very large extent, a certain portion of it could be guaranteed up to a certain percentage, which is fair enough. Now, when you have that kind of case, fine. Now, let me start to look at the risk associated with housing generally, from the supply and the demand side. So the first thing is, if you want to buy a house, a property, again, let's go back to the income levels. So 50% of Nigerians do not have income at all. That is at least 100 million people. They don't have income at all. Now, those that have income, out of those sets, or that income bracket in the pyramid, another 30% of them, they're working in small places, one-man businesses, government, and all of that. They can afford to get something, they can rent at least. Of course, you have to get at the top that can afford everything most of the time. Now, within this bracket, it means that we're discounting those that don't even have sort of income at all. So we're looking at those that can at least earn something little. For those that can earn something little, the first option is, can they own their own houses? If they can't, can they at least rent, Who is providing them with these houses? Is it going to be government? Is it some kind of NGO? We don't have real estate or housing NGOs in Nigeria as such, right? And so the kind of funding, free funding that comes, we go to, say, Pennsylvania and the US, for example. A lot of houses there are social, they're organized. The NGOs provide the houses and they can then slide your rent. You pay whatever you want to pay, whatever you can afford, and all of that. Now, in our own case, what that then means is that cash flow is so little, it means that then determines the kind of place you can get. Now, assuming there's an asset management company or a financial institution or some innovative institution that says, okay, do you know what? I've got excess cash. With my excess cash, I can buy a lot of property in the market, or I can go for some kind of long lease and then sublet to people that will pay me, in bits. That can actually happen. because you have cases where, especially non-interest financial institutions, especially the core banks now, they're usually prone to excess liquidity most of the time. When that happens, yes, they can, if they have love for real estate. But don't forget that a lot of banks don't have love for real estate, right? They don't. They just don't. So if you look at Nigeria, for example, in the last 40 years, we've only, all the banks put together, all the mortgages they've created is less than 1% of their total asset book. Everything they've done in construction in the last 40 years is less than 11% of the total asset book. By construction, it includes roads, other structures, So the volume that goes into real estate is tiny, right? So because it's tiny, it affects supply. And even when you have supply, the supply is then well, if you like, it goes to just one side, the high income one. So these are the guys that can allow you meet up your cost of funds and all the other problems that you have, with getting the fund. Now, for those at the bottom of the pyramid, their own problem is, the guys developing for them, the problem is the return. So I have somebody, for example, that used to develop in Oniru. Oniru is a good area, and by all standard. I was like, no, you have stopped developing Oniru. You try to develop in Ikoyi. Why? Because its cost of construction is the same thing, and it's going to make a lot more money in Ikoyi. So you just imagine somebody that develops in Surulere or Yaba. You can as well say, I don't want to develop in Yaba anymore, because why do I want to sell my house for 25 million? When I can put the same amount to some JV in Ikoyi or somewhere.
So what happens to people that cannot afford Ikoyi?
Yeah. So I think the focus really should be around urban regeneration, right? Because Yaba is one of the best places to live, in Lagos. Fantastic. It was planned by the British. It was part of the Lagos colony at that time. And if you look at it very well, a place like what they call it, Mushin. Mushin is fantastic. What stops somebody from buying the whole street, buy all the little houses and redevelop so that, you can build something within the city rather than having to go to Ikorodu all the time or go to Ekpe or go to even far further than Ajah. If you live in Ajah, for example, it's going to take you 3 hours to get to Victoria Island on a typical weekday. So what they've done in a lot of other jurisdictions is to go for urban regeneration, to regenerate urban system, to renew the houses so that middle income guys can at least live there. So that has become very important. But who's going to do that? Developers can do it. They can do that in partnership with other people. I think my own interest, if you like, someone interested in finance, is to start to create financial models that will allow us to create such affordable housing. So I'm going to have to discount social housing at this time, and that's because the required subsidy that will allow you to have social housing, just like you even have in Singapore or even Thailand, and these guys started to do all of this in the last 20, 30 years, so we had better GDP than them just some 40 years back. We don't have, because we are poor as a country, which is a function of our GDP per capita, it then means that we just do not have the resources to do these things, no matter how much you try. If you have to build a unit at 5 million naira, right, I want to build 300,000 units, which is believed to be the annual deficit, you're going to need 1.5 trillion. You don't have that. Where is it going to come from? Not from the budget, not from anywhere. If anybody's got 1.3, 1.5 trillion, you're going to put it in some other venture that will give you quick returns, So it requires, even in terms of interest rates, if you look at the secondary mortgage institutions that should support with some of this finance, I don't want to mention their names as such. One of the top secondary mortgage institutions has only provided 20,000 mortgages since when it was created in days of Babangida. So the supply is then limited. Now you're having a lot more effort with other developmental associations to see how best they can increase the supply. Not the supply for those at the top of the pyramid, but at least for those in the middle. And what will then, unfortunately, for those at the bottom of the pyramid, the last 50%, it means, I wouldn't say they will suffer, but it means that they will have to still live in family houses and live in substandard accommodation. It was on the basis of this that by the time the World Bank did their survey they did their research on houses in Nigeria, they discounted it so badly. They didn't count a lot of houses. For them, they said, that was way back 2012. They say you have 17 million housing deficit. That's because they didn't count all the houses around Makoko. They didn't count all the funny villages here and there. They just didn't count them. They didn't think they are proper houses.
Dwelling places.
Yes. So back to the question. How do you want